It's currently the start of August. Fire Emblem Three Houses came out on the 26th of July, and in, a week? Just over a week, like 9 days maybe at this point. I've put 56 hours into Fire Emblem Three Houses, and I'm literally, this morning I was like, Bally, can we record later? Because I'm about to finish the game. I got to a point and I was like, actually, no, this is going to take longer than I thought.
There's no way that was the end of the game.
I'm literally one chapter away from the end of the game, basically. So I have a pretty comprehensive outlook on Fire Emblem Three Houses and all that stuff. But we'll talk about all that stuff. I forgot to say, Bally, you need to tell us what we're going to talk about in this show. So let's get that out of the way first.
So as episode 150 is going to be an extended episode, it's going to be a slightly shorter show this week with 2 segments. First segment, we've got a lot of Fire Emblem to talk about, other games we've been playing, and then second segment, we've got a couple of your listener emails.
Absolutely, yes. But we are going to kick things off by talking about Fire Emblem Three Houses, which is obviously a huge game, a big release for Nintendo. I think it is the best-selling Fire Emblem at launch so far in the history of the franchise. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. That seems to be happening for pretty much every big Nintendo property that has come out, right? The Switch just has...
On Switch, yeah.
It has this magnetic nature when it comes to its install base of people who are like, hey, I'll just buy everything, right? Like, people like buying things on Switch, and they want to be there day one, and they want to get in on these new games, and I do think that Fire Emblem Three Houses is attractive from a marketing perspective. Like, I think that they have framed it as a big boy console experience. Like, it's definitely much more impressive visually and all that stuff compared to its previous handheld outings. And we're now at a point where a console Fire Emblem can actually succeed because the series has been so popular since Awakening. It's like 7 years ago now, in 2012 or whatever. And yeah, it's interesting because I think there are a lot of people jumping on for the first time. So I think a lot of people even listening to this podcast might be first-time Fire Emblem people. And I think a lot of it is intimidating, right? A lot of it can be overwhelming. Yeah. And you, Bally, obviously are not as big of Fire Emblem fan as I am. And I want you to maybe speak to the beginning stages of the game,
sure.
Like how you felt about how it introduces mechanics and things like that, and your impressions kind of currently of how it's going for you.
So I think presentation-wise, the first 10 hours have been fantastic. I think the voiceovers, VO makes a huge difference. I already really enjoyed recent Fire Emblem writing in Birthright, Conquest, and Awakening. I already enjoyed sort of the support conversations and the character relationships and things like that. And I think that in terms of that, the voice acting just makes such a big step up. On top of, like, I think the art style is quite distinct. It took me like a little while to get used to, but I am now in favor of this art style. Like, I think it works well. So like from a presentation perspective, I think it's very welcoming to sort of a new Fire Emblem player. Mechanically, oh boy, like I'm someone who like knows Fire Emblem. I know how it works. I know good strategies. I know about like traditional class systems and this, that, and the other. And I think that to take what used to be the weapon skill level and turn that into its whole range of stats now per character that you can level up independently of, you know, their regular levels that boost their other stats. I hope I've articulated that correctly.
Well, so let's explain it, because we have, when you're in the school area, right, when you're running around the monastery, when you're teaching the kids, essentially, when you teach them, there are different kind of stats that you put investment into. And these are what traditionally would be the weapon levels, right?
Yes.
But also they have things like riding or heavy armor or flying skill or authority, which is a brand new thing that governs a completely separate aspect of the battle system. And so these skills are now kind of the core things by which a lot of the game operates, because not only do you have to have like sword level B to be able to wield a silver sword, for example, which you always had to do in any Fire Emblem game, was like iron sword requires E level, then steel sword requires D level, etc., etc. They've now added in an extra layer because you have A+, B+, C+, etc. So there's like a plus level because it's a long game and they want you to take your time to kind of build through these stats. But also all of the classes are now based around what levels in those particular stats that you have. So in order to be a archer, you have to have, say, a D level in bows, right? And you can't change your class. Well, you technically can. You'll just have a lower percentage chance to do so, because changing class in this game is like taking an exam, essentially. Like, they build up their skills, and the higher their skill is, the more likely they are to pass the exam. So if they have that exact skill that you need, they have a 100% chance. If they're close to it, if they're like a B plus and it needs an A, you might see it says like, 75% chance to pass. And I have, especially in the later game, where some of the master classes require a lot of weird combinations that you aren't really prepared for. I have had moments where I'm like 68% chance to pass, and I've just gone for it. I make a save beforehand, and like if I fail, I'll just reload, and I just do it. And then sometimes I pass, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't actually need to invest in it anymore because I now have the class I want. So it's a little weird in that sense, because you can kind of take it to the edge, but it's also about whether you want to guarantee it or not. And it's much safer, I think, in the early game to just guarantee it, or easier, as it were, because a lot of the class skills make sense, as opposed to later on in the game where they make less sense.
I would say where original Fire Emblem games, each unit had a specific class that could then upgrade into a range of other specific classes based on that character. It's now a lot more malleable, and essentially the game is forcing you to create gates, I guess, and channels with which you have to fulfill those stats in order to upgrade to that class. So it just gives you far more options. It really opens up kind of what you can do with each character, on top of the fact that they're kind of like new classes in the way that, like, authority, as you said, is like a completely new thing. And for someone like me, that definitely was overwhelming, like especially for the first 3 hours. And as you said, like, you have these classes, but then before you go into the classes, it's important that your characters have high motivation, because you need to raise their motivation in order to make those classes more productive. So you spend time in the monastery and doing lots of other things, boosting motivation. But you can also do loads of other stuff in the monastery. You can give people gifts. That also improves relationships and motivation. You can have support conversations. You can go for cups of tea. You can go for tea parties. You can go for lunch. You can fish. You can do gardening. You can create a wealth of things that you can use for gifts, as well as boosting motivation, as well as, I don't know, buying and selling stuff. And there's a lot. And where I feel like the series reached a real kind of streamlined experience, I'd almost say, with a game like Fates. I think the aspects were quite streamlined, and it was quite well explained. They have definitely reopened that formula and kind of done something, in my view, very different.
It's entirely different, yeah.
And that is a lot to take in, but 10 hours in, I am actually now feeling like I know what class I want characters to be. I feel like I know where I want to go in the monastery to do this specific thing before I do my next mission. There's still huge aspects of the game I've not been doing much of, and kind of thought, I don't really know what the benefit of that is versus doing this other thing that I already know is much better. For example, I think like eating with two of your class rather than fishing or something is worth it's a better use of your time, because it increases motivation, it increases the support level between those three characters. And I just think the game doesn't do an amazing job of saying this is much better than that. It very much lets you work that bit out, and that can maybe be not very handholdy at a time when you probably are just wanting a bit of a handhold at points, just to kind of work out where you want to go next.
Definitely. And I think the good thing about the start of the game is it does limit you, right? Like, it opens up portions of the monastery slowly so that you can get used to them. And I think one of the things that people complain about a lot is just text boxes for tutorialization, and I tend to not be a huge fan of that. I know that you're kind of fine. Like,
I love them. I'd be lost in this game without those, honestly.
Right, exactly. And you can just pull that up at any time. Like, the guide is in the menu, and you can just go back, and there's lots of little things that they will explain to you. But I think some of the stuff that you need to clear up about the monastery is there are certain things that take up points, and there are certain things that do not, right? Yeah. So, like, there are certain activities which are specific to your professor level, right? And your professor level goes up as you interact with your students, as you teach them, as you do loads of different things to up your professor level. The higher your professor level, the more activities you can do per exploration of the monastery.
So it's very important.
Exactly, right? And at this point in the game, I have like 10 activity points. Like I can basically, like I have too many activity points.
So per class, you can teach 10 like individual.
Well, no, that's slightly different, right? Because so there's lots of activity points, right? When you go into battle on during the month, right? Because this game is split into months, and each month you will have 4 weekends, usually, maybe 3 sometimes, in order to spend your free time and do what you want. So you can either explore the monastery, which means going and doing all the stuff that you just talked about. You can go for a battle, which means sometimes you can do paralogs, which are side quests. Sometimes you can find rare monsters and things like that. And you can also do seminars where you're able to get other teachers in to improve the weapon skills or whatever of your students. So for battles, you usually have far fewer activity points for battles. Like I think at the moment I have 3. When it comes to teaching your students, you have a different set of activity points, and then when it comes to just doing stuff in the monastery, you have a different set of activity points. So there's just a lot of these different sets that you have that you kind of are separate from one another, but you do build them up as your professor level gets higher. So that is kind of all tied together, but they are also separate. So like at this point in time, I can teach all of my students every time I want to go into one of those sessions because I have enough points to do so. But where you're at, you might have like 3 students you can teach at a time, right? So that stuff does expand, and you get a lot more time to do it, and it kind of streamlines a little bit later on. But in terms of some of the activities that you do while you're in the monastery, I think I got into a routine, right, of like, okay, first thing I do is I'm going to the greenhouse to do my gardening. Then I'm going to go do a bit of fishing. Then I'm going to go...
What's the benefit of gardening mainly? Just to create flowers as gifts for people?
Yes, so you can get flowers as gifts. You can get food items, which are then used for either cooking or for when you have meals with people, because meals cost whatever food resources you have. So you need to have, tomatoes or cabbages or whatever to make, or fish, for example, to make, dishes in the actual sitting down and having a meal section of the game in the dining hall. So a lot of that stuff comes from doing the gardening, doing the fishing. So those are very light activities that will increase your professor level, but don't actually take away an activity point because they're very like minor things. Whereas going for tea time with someone, which is like a one-on-one conversation where you kind of have a skill challenge, a conversation skill challenge, where you have to choose the right response that you think that person would like. And it's weird. I feel like it's a very weird framing. Have you done a tea time yet? Have you kind of...
No, where do I go to do that?
I don't know if you've unlocked it. You might not have unlocked it yet, but usually what happens is you just go up to a character and it'll be an option on them when you talk to them that says tea time. And every time you go for a tea time, it pops up like 3 options that you have to choose from, and one of them would be like capable comrades, one of them is like monastery memories, and one of them's like something else. And you have to, they're more like conversation topics almost, so you're trying to pick a conversation topic that you think that person would be interested in. And it's fascinating because it is to some degree a bit random, and sometimes you're like, well, that doesn't make it, like, why would I choose that? It doesn't make any sense. But I did find myself as I was going through the game, and I think this speaks to the level of writing this game has elevated to, and the voice acting and everything to do with the characterization, is that when I started out, I didn't really know the characters very well. I didn't know their backstories. I didn't know much about where they come from, etc. And so I'd go into tea times and I would get all the questions wrong. I would just fucking fail it straight out, and I wouldn't get much out of the conversation. It would be like, you get to this point in the end, it's like, well, this was an awkward conversation. Like, it kind of says something along those lines. I'm like, oh shit, I'm like wasted all this time doing this. And as I've got further through the game and you get to know these people more, when you go into a tea time, now I'm like, okay, that's the option, and that's the option, and I'm just getting them right now, and I'm getting them correct because I have known these characters, and I've built up that knowledge, not through my skill in the game, like I'm not getting experience points, well I am in support and stuff, but that's using my own knowledge of the characters because I have watched all these support conversations and listened to all their dialogue and all that stuff, which is pretty satisfying, I have to say. It's interesting that They've kind of gamified conversation to some degree, though at points it does feel a little random, and it does feel a little like, I don't know what option of these I should pick. It doesn't, not everything fits in very neatly, particularly with each character. But in that sense, the monastery stuff definitely becomes more routine, I would say. At the first kind of few times you go around, it's more about learning the space and learning where things are. I did mention this on Twitter, but when I first started playing, maybe it was the TV I was on or whatever, but I did start to feel a bit motion sick because I do think the frame rate in this game is not fantastic. There are clear and noticeable moments where it fluctuates and wobbles and stutters. And the monastery is a big example of that because it's a big wide open area. Intelligent Systems has never done anything like this before. And to be honest, Intelligent Systems didn't actually really develop this game. I think in total there were 17 developers from Intelligent Systems who worked on this, because this game was basically developed by Koei Tecmo. Like, that is ridiculous, and that's what happened. And you can definitely sense some of that jank to some degree. I don't know
that shininess that you'd associate with Koei Tecmo. I don't know.
Yeah, Warriors games and stuff like that, they have jank. They're not particularly the most polished games in the world. And this game is polished to some degrees. I do think the support conversation cutscenes, the character models are fantastic. A lot of that stuff is really sharp on a good HD screen. But some of the stuff when it comes to wandering around and just, obstacles and things like that, it feels a little less polished than you would maybe expect of a first-party Nintendo product. But that said, I do think it's interesting that they have branched out into this more Persona style of exploration. And what I'll say is, it doesn't quite hit the notes that Persona does. And I think that the perfect thing about Persona is that it limits you. And I think the monastery is not limiting enough, especially in the late game, in the sense that with Persona, you will have times of the day where it's like, okay, you've finished school, you can do all these things, but you can only do one of them. And you've got to pick which one you want to do. And so in your head, you're constantly like, okay, tomorrow I'll do that, and then the next day I'll do that. You're constantly thinking, I'll do that the next day. Whereas in the monastery...
Like Stardew Valley or something.
Right, exactly. It's exactly like Stardew Valley. It's constantly having that mental checklist in your head. Whereas with this game, you have the whole month to play with, and within the month, you can do a lot of shit. So, to be honest with you, you can kind of get everything you want done within one exploration thing. You can do all the side quests, all the mini kind of fetch questy things. You can do all your support conversations you want to do.
Are they worth doing, those side questy, fetch questy things? Because some of those use up a point and some don't.
I don't remember any of them using up a point for me personally.
I just did one with Geralt that did use up a point.
Well, I think that was more of a main... Was it a red one? Because I think that's more of a main quest one, probably.
Must have been.
Yeah, because the other ones don't tend to use up points unless they're specifically telling you to do something. Like one of the early game side quests is just introducing you to the training area, which is where you do like the Colosseum gladiator battles, which I showed you when you were over in Edinburgh. And that activity will use up a point, but it's the side quest is just telling you to do that activity, if you know what I mean, right? Whereas a lot of the side quests will be like, I dropped a thing, find it, and you'll see a little glowing thing on your map, and you have to go there and pick it up or whatever. So I would say do them because they're very light, like they don't require a lot of effort, and you'll get shit for doing them, which is usually worthwhile. So you might as well. I've done every single one. Like they're very easy to just kind of breeze through, and it is just the thing that you have constantly going. But what it does mean is that instead of spending like 2 minutes making a decision in Persona to like go have a drink at the bar with a journalist or whatever and do build up your confidant there, in this case it's like you're going to spend an hour and a half in the monastery, and you're going to just get everything you want to get done. And you're going to just have a lot of... For me, I had a lot of choice paralysis, right? Because there are so many things. There are so many systems in this game. I haven't even mentioned things like battalions or, forging and repairing and all this other stuff that you can do within that space, that you get this paralysis of like, oh, what do I do? Like, I've got 19 things to do. Which do I do? And how do I prioritize? And so I found myself a lot of the time constantly pinging between menus, whether it is in the dining hall having food between two characters and being like, okay, but I want to have food between these two characters. I want to make sure that it maxes out their motivation, but I also want to make sure that the two characters that I pick are characters that I want to build their support with so that I can then get their support conversation later. So a lot of my time was just in menus thinking in my head like, okay, I need to make the most optimal situation possible. And I think to some degree, because I optimize so much in the early game, I'm in the late game now and I'm just kind of breezing through a lot of the stuff because I'm like, I've achieved all my aims. I literally, every single one of my classmates has had up to an A support conversation with every single other classmate. There is not a single person from Black Eagles who has not had a maxed out support conversation with every other person in the class. Which is crazy, because I never do that with support conversations in other games, because a lot of the time there are so many characters that it's just not really feasible. Like, you can do it in games like Awakening, but what it requires of you is just so much grinding, because in a game like that, the only way to build support is to stand next to each other in battle. But the idea of the monastery is that it gives you so many other ways to build that support, that not only do you want to go after them, but it just kind of naturally happens. It just happens so much more immediately, and also in battles, it's so much more lenient with it, right? You don't have to be standing next to someone. You have to be within, I think, 3 spaces of them. So there are often moments where my entire army is clustered together, and so tons of people are just popping off supports left and right. And I think the most important thing about this is, you mentioned it, but the voice acting is so strong in this game. It is a level that Nintendo just hasn't done before, and there are very few exceptions to this rule. Like, I think Kid Icarus Uprising is great. Xenoblade Chronicles, just Xenoblade as a series, I think Xenoblade 2 is a little weak on that front, but the original Xenoblade I think is fantastic. Even Fire Emblem Echoes. Fire Emblem Echoes is really, you look at that as a blueprint for a lot of what this game does, down to things like Mila's turn wheel, which was allowing you to like turn back turns, gives you Divine Pulse in this game, which is another aspect that has meant I haven't restarted any fight at all throughout this entire game, because Divine Pulse is so useful as just like I fucked up that thing. Even something stupid like I open a chest with Petra and I accidentally, instead of sending it to the storage, I discard it, and like I threw away a really powerful weapon. I was like, fuck, I don't want to throw away that weapon, but all I had to do was just Divine Pulse back and undo that mistake, which is, I can't tell you how important that level of just giving you freedom to have the wiggle room is in a game like this. Because for someone like me, I play on Classic, I don't want to lose anybody, but it does mean in a game like Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, I was at a map for like 4 or 5, 6 hours because every time
just kept restarting.
I had to restart and I had to go from the beginning, right? And this game just gives you that leeway to kind of move away from it. But yeah, I do think one of the strongest aspects in this game is the writing and the story. It is on another level from where Fire Emblem has been before. And that's not to say like it's touching stuff like Uncharted or The Last of Us or like the kind of really good writing that we see in video games these days, because it's very far away from that. It still leans to some degree towards anime tropes, but it's less so than it has been in the past. But it is more of a, very big characters, very bombastic things they're saying, sometimes very ridiculous things, but they are emoting and they are kind of getting across the depth of their characters in a way that is more nuanced and more interesting than anything Fire Emblem has attempted in the past, in my mind. And so that's why I think it is so worthwhile to do those support conversations. And it's actually why I'm not too worried about replaying this game to do Golden Deers and to do Blue Lions, because one of my favorite things about this game is just getting to know those characters.
Less so the overall plot.
Well, I think the overall plot is really good. I think it's one of the things that I think...
Considering your history with Fire Emblem plots is almost, you don't care at all about like the overall plot.
Right, and I mean, it is generic to some degree, but, there are twists that you don't see coming. There are things that happen where you're like, oh, shit, like this changes everything. And there is also a really good sense in the second half of the game when the war is happening of all the moving pieces and where you are relative to them. Whereas in a game, I just finished Radiant Dawn recently, I streamed that game, and I have no fucking clue where anybody is or what relates to who and which country is where and all that shit. Whereas this game, in the cutscenes, does a good job of, like, it almost puts, like, a chess piece on a map and shows you, like, a direct line of, like, where the army is going and then to this point. And, like, really visualizes it for someone like me who struggles with knowing stuff like that, which I think is very, very smart and has worked very well. So yeah, I do have to emphasize that one of the strongest suits in this game, which in the past has been so rightly criticized, like Fates especially, has a garbage story with characters who are very, very shallow. This starts that way to some degree. You take a character, for example, like Dorothea, she's a songstress, she used to be in the opera, and her initial conversations you have with people are all about, like, oh, she needs to marry a rich man so that she can, not have to worry about her life anymore, and that's her entire goal, is like go on dates with all these guys and try and find someone who is going to be right for her. And you're like, oh god, that's terrible. Like, this seems like a really badly written character. But over time, layers evolve, you peel things back, and you find out about her backstory, about, like, her dealings with nobles, because she's a commoner, and some class stuff. There's a lot of class stuff in this game, right? Because there's a very distinct difference between nobles and commoners. And that stuff is very revealing, and you, by doing all these conversations with all these different characters, you piece together the backstory, and there will be overlap sometimes. You'll be like, oh, right, I heard that thing in that conversation, but now she's bringing it up here. It's really good. I think it is 100% worth doing all those support conversations, because you will get such a better sense of these characters and who they are and where they're coming from. I've been
really enjoying the support conversations so far. And like we said before, the voice acting, it's just... Yeah, it's good.
It's crazy how much of it there is, because it's not just in those conversations, it's in all the major story moments. It's literally every part of this game, down to wandering around the monastery.
You can see why it was delayed quite a while, this game. Just recording all of that.
Down to wandering around the monastery and being able to talk to everyone, and literally everyone will have a voice line. Nintendo games do not do that. Ever. Like, that is something they just have never done, which is mind-blowing to me that they have put this much time into the VO talent of this game. It's crazy. And it does, I think, elevate it, right? It makes it feel like a AAA game, where potentially people who played 3DS games wouldn't have thought of it in that vein. I personally do, because Awakening and Fates have very high production values. They're fantastic, really high quality games, but a lot of people don't have that perspective on it because they deem handheld games as inferior or whatever. But I think Three Houses just makes a case for, like, how big Fire Emblem is now and how important it is to kind of throw money at this thing.
I think I'm too early on to kind of compare it. Where is this in my mind compared to Awakening and Fates? But as a 10-hour experience, as someone slightly less into Fire Emblem, I would actually say that a game like Awakening is probably easier, simpler, explains systems slightly better than a game like Three Houses. And
it's less complicated, right?
Yes.
It does have things like the pair-up system, which isn't in this game, but this game has battalions. Have you got to battalions yet?
I have been using battalions. I'm a little confused. I understand they're represented by the 3 triangles, but sometimes I have a unit that has 2 triangles. What does that mean?
So that means that you've been hit a bunch. So when you take damage, your battalion will reduce. Even if you don't use your battalion, they will reduce. So yeah, it is a little tricky to figure that out. But that, I was wondering, because I'm like, I haven't been using any battalions. Like, why do I have to keep replenishing them? And it's because, when you get hit, you take damage. As such, naturally the warriors who are with you will also take damage because they're getting hit by the attack.
Yeah, I think they're cool. I think as a traditional Fire Emblem player, it's very difficult to remember to use them, definitely, and kind of mix it into my array of what I normally do.
Right, because you have multiple different things popping up. It's like attack, assist, gambit. There's just lots of things that...
Yeah, what is gambit again? That's when they're surrounded, right? And you get extra damage.
No, gambit is using the battalion. Gambit is literally how you use your battalion.
But sometimes it says gambit and sometimes it just says, battalion, doesn't it? Or is it always,
no, it doesn't.
Always gambit?
It's always gambit, yeah. Gambit is just using your battalion. That's your battalion attack, essentially.
And what's it called when you surround an enemy? Because that's another new mechanic.
Right, so that, I don't know what that's called, but I do know that what happens is if someone is adjacent to an enemy, then you get a bonus, I think. So
It's
it's
like
not
more damage,
it's
more
not if they're adjacent to you. It's like D&D.
just-
It's like if they're flanking the enemy,
Yeah.
then you get a bonus or whatever.
I use the Wargroove example. It's like the dogs versus the lance users in Wargroove, like
Right, exactly.
adjacent versus adjacent to the enemy.
Exactly, yeah, where the lances, you have to stand them next to each other versus the dogs. The dog has to be next to the enemy when you attack with the other dog or whatever.
So I would be interested to like kind of look online and see what other people who are new to Fire Emblem think of this game, because I definitely personally think it's quite a lot to take in. It can get a little bit spreadsheety at points, especially
it's
when you're
100% a spreadsheet game.
And I think the Monastery
is
a very good cover up for what is essentially a series of complex spreadsheets. But
I mean, you can boil all video games down to that if you really want to be reductive.
I would argue less so action games, but yeah, no, absolutely. Like, it does a good job of covering up a lot of that stuff, but then at the same time, I don't think there's been so much when you press X and you like look at the multiple stats of any one character. I don't think I've ever seen so many stats on like a single screen compared to any other Fire Emblem.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't help itself, right? Because it adds in all these new things, but then it has a lot of legacy things, right? From the skills, which all the skills, a lot of them are from previous games. Things like Aegis, Pervice, Lethality, all these like skills that are very class specific skills. So like the thief always has steal and lock touch, which means you can open doors and open chests and also steal things from enemies, which also I think steal is very redundant in this game, because not once have I come across an enemy that I could steal something from, because every enemy that drops something just drops it and I just get it when I kill them. So steal, I think that's just a legacy thing in there, because it seems pretty fucking pointless to me. But yeah, so you have all those abilities, which are like the 5 slots that you have, but now you have new ones based on the skills that you're being taught. So when you get better with bows, your bow, whatever it's called, I can't remember what it's called.
Avo.
No, that's a void. Avo is a void. I mean,
hit.
No. I'm talking about the skills that are
skills,
like
not
authority level 5 or bow level 2, right? And though you're right, those will grant those types of bonuses,
which is weird in and of itself. Yeah,
sure, but like those are the ones that you want to have, because like if you're really good with swords, you want to have sword level 5, right? Because it gives you a bunch of bonuses when you're using a sword, because you're going to be using a sword. So you have
it's just a very weird way to level up your sword in that way.
Exactly,
it's very different.
And then they don't have the weapons triangle, but then they supplement it with class-specific skills like Lance Breaker or Axe Breaker, which have always been in recent games in the series from Awakening onwards, and now they are there to kind of supplement that. So yes, you can attack a lance person with a sword, but if they have lance or sword breaker, they will still have a distinct advantage. Right. So, especially in the late game, that will likely be the case, that enemies will have those skills, etc.
Right.
So they are obfuscating it somewhat, but it kind of still exists. And to be honest with you, I never really relied on the weapon triangle that much. A lot of my Fire Emblem play was more about
in this game or traditionally.
Traditionally, like I never really
same.
Like there are moments when you do think about it, but a lot of the time it's like, hey, I'm like 6 levels higher than this dude. It doesn't fucking matter what I use. Like the RPG elements will kind of overturn a lot of the strategic elements in some senses.
I think I focused on weapons triangle a lot more in the GBA games, like when I played 7. I felt like it felt more important then, but Awakening and the 2 Fates games, it's definitely a step down in terms of like that.
Sure, because you have skills and things that change, your approach, which means that it's because like the GBA games, I always talk about them as like the purest version of Fire Emblem. Like they are just the core essence of Fire Emblem distilled down, and I think it is why I still look at those games as my favorites in the series, is because there's no bullshit. Like there's no skills, there's no all this, there's very simple class definitions, like you go from archer to sniper, it makes sense, it's done, right? There's less customization, but in a sense I like that, because it means you know where you're going and you know what you have to do. Whereas in the later games it does get a little bit up in the air with things like that. So
on the sort of information on the screen, 2 points. First point, I still think the 3DS games just have such a a jump up on that, just because they can store so much of those numbers and crucial information onto the bottom screen, and it just makes everything feel cleaner, look cleaner, easier to use, because you can like use the stylus to touch any of those stats, and it's really quick to see what that stat means. I found myself pressing across like menus just to get to find out what that one skill did, that I would traditionally have just touched the stylus on the bottom screen to find out what that skill did. And then secondly, can we please have an industry standard for size of font in video games? Because Fire Emblem Three Houses is just taking the piss with this, because it is tiny.
I disagree, honestly. Maybe I'm just scarred from Xenoblade Chronicles X, but nothing will be as bad as Xenoblade Chronicles X in my mind. That was ridiculous. This I think is fine.
I'll give you that, but Xenoblade Chronicles X is above and beyond anything in video games in terms of size of font. And like, this is like, I know God of War was a big one in recent times for people, but this is way, way, way smaller than God of War.
But I think for me it's less important because the voice acting exists, and so I am still looking at the text, but it's less
but
laser focused.
We need an industry standard. It's just
we do. No, I totally agree with that. I think that 100%. Like, you need to be able to
even the option to increase the size, which you can
resizing at the very least should be like, customization options, especially on console, are so bad. Like, it's just, they really have no way of remapping buttons and things like that. Just, there's so many things that Nintendo especially need to do to appeal to a wider audience, to make things more accessible, essentially, and they don't, because Nintendo are very obsessed with the way people play and all of that nonsense. But I get where you're coming from. It just hasn't really bothered me. Maybe it's because I'm playing on screens that are pretty close to me. I played less so on TV.
Even on handheld, it is very small. Like, it's and when that Switch Lite comes out later this year, like, that's gonna feel,
it'll be smaller,
even smaller. So
that's true. Yeah, I get that for sure. It's a little cumbersome, and I think when we're talking about presentation, I do think the monastery stuff is really good, but I don't think the battle screen itself is particularly easy to read, and I think because there's a lot of clutter. One of the problems I have is every character by default will have their little portrait and little is it their weapons next to them or something? There's all these portraits. There's a lot of information on all the enemies and all of your characters, and I only figured out, not recently, but maybe, I don't know, 20 hours into the game, that you can just press the X button and that will disappear, and then you can just see the characters, which makes it a lot easier to select which character you want to select, because I think those character portraits were really obfuscating people who are in front or behind each other. I didn't know who I was selecting, which was confusing.
Yeah, and you can rotate the camera so it's looking much more aerial, but then that sucks a lot of the life out of
it does
setting, I feel.
But I found a good middle ground where I could rotate the camera and see, because there's one map that happens maybe chapter 4 or something, where you have these very big walls and you can't see the enemies behind them on the default camera setting. So unless you tip the camera up, you don't know there's a fucking enemy behind that wall. Like, it's a little bit stupid. So I think this is the problem, right? Because I naturally love what they did on the handheld series with making the battle screen characters all sprite based, like having those sprites integrated there.
It's so clean and crisp. It's got a specific style,
and the visual identity of the classes is so clear in the sprite design. The sprite design makes it so obvious what class that character is.
You're like, just as a really quick thing, your bulkier sprites were often the upgraded ones, because they had more little pixels animating like a little cape or lapel or something silly, or a wyvern or something, and then your basic units were the skinnier, less developed ones, I guess you could say, and then that differential is almost non-existent in this game in a way that just feels very jarring. And on top of the fact, I think the 3DS games were really good at making really bold, red, clear, squares for the units selected and where they could move, and all of that just feels a little more faded than it did on the 3DS, and it just
it's a little more so.
It's not quite as clear, and I do like that clarity, especially when we are talking grid-based, turn-based strategy, where it's so important.
Sure, and you did play Conquest really recently, so I think it's a lot clearer in your mind. And I'm thinking back to it now, and when you press the button to show all the enemy movement, it is a deep red. It is very clear, and not to say that it's not clear here, because I think it is. Have if you press the shoulder button, I think it said R, it shows the purple range, which is all enemies.
Yeah, you got that purple, and then you can individually select the red, which is useful. Yeah.
Which is I love that feature. I love being able to see everyone and then the specific one.
I leave purple on, and then I do not the immediate wave, but the wave behind.
Right.
So I'm trying to deal with one wave of enemies each turn, and I know that I have to. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's really good to figure out. And another amazing thing this game does, which some people might cry out blasphemy, but it shows you these red lines that tell you not only who the enemy is going to attack, but their percentage hit chance and how much damage they will do to that character, which is really important. So as if the Divine Pulse wasn't enough to give you kind of backups, this really lets you stop and think and be like, actually, I can't. I think I could maybe put that person there, but I can't. They're going to die, so I'm not going to do that. And I think for newer players especially, that's such a helpful thing. And for me, I don't pay attention to it that much, because as someone who's played a lot of Fire Emblem, I kind of know who I can put where. Like, if there's a big magic person coming, I can put a mage there because they have high resistance, whatever. Like, I know how to figure my way around, but it's really helpful for people who are new to the series, for sure. So some of the visual stuff is a step forward, some of it's a step back. I think it's especially bad at the start of the game, when everyone is in their school uniform and they don't have different outfits to differentiate them. At this point, like, characters like Mercedes and Dorothea, they're both magic units, but I can tell the difference because their outfits are just so vastly different from one another. Whereas in the early game, it's like Linhardt and Hubert, they're both around the same size, they both have similar haircuts, both have dark hair, like, they both look the fucking same on the map. So just figuring out who is a case of going over them and just figuring out their character portrait. So that's an early game criticism that I think is just a factor of, you start out and they're all the same class because they're all just like noble or commoner and they're in their school uniform, really. So it's a bit of a confusion, but it's overcome. It does make sense. Have you found the map so far and kind of the objectives and the battles themselves? Like, how's that been, and difficulty-wise? And
I mean, that's a big takeaway from this game, is that with Conquest or Awakening, Birthright, and that, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time I'm playing Fire Emblem, I'm spending on a map battling. And you really feel with this game that has dropped right down to maybe 50, 60%. Because
it's probably 50%.
Right, exactly. Because you really are spending a lot of time in the monastery, and in spreadsheets is a harsh word, but like in menus where you're leveling up skills and, boosting your armor and your flying and all these things. And
so, and I mean, we can talk about the UI. We've always talked about it a little bit, but the whole, like, all the class stuff, the way that is doled out and where you have to go to change classes and see what skills you need for class, it's just... Like, why do I have to go into certifications to see all the classes? Why is reclass not in the certifications menu and I have to go into my inventory? Why the fuck is reclass in inventory? That makes no sense. What? Like, the inventory menu opens up to 5 other fucking menus. It's ridiculous. It's so illogical.
And I've been constantly asking you, like, what do I need to do this? I can't even find the thing on in Google to find this. And you're like, oh, you want this sheet? I'm like, no, I'm missing that one thing. Oh, no, this one. Like, all right, yeah, okay. And how do I link that to the game? Okay, right, okay. And it's a lot, and I think...
It's a lot. It's also a thing that, like, after playing 55 hours, I don't even think twice about it, but that's just because I've played so much that it just burned into my brain now.
And some of them are more straightforward, like, what do you do to become a sniper? You really need to be good at archery. Like, that is fine. Like, that's a consistent thing with the series, but there are some random uses of the lance that are needed in a number of them. And...
The one that drove me fucking crazy was, in order to become a paladin, you need to have really high lance and really high riding. Yeah?
Yeah, which makes sense.
In order to get Paladin to the logical next class, which is the Great Knight, which is the Master class, you need to then have Axe and Heavy Armor. 2 things which I hadn't invested in at all for my Paladin. Nowhere close to doing. God, and so in order to get him from stage 3 to stage 4... I had to go out of my way to be like, okay, Ferdinand, right, we're going to change your focus to be heavy armor. We're going to put you on the goal where you're doing the weeding, so you're doing the heavy armor skill. I'm going to, try and just
Why is
boost that as
wielding
much
heavy
as possible.
armor? That's just hilarious.
That will make more sense in the second
Okay,
half of the
fine.
game. Why they've tied that together. It also, yes, it doesn't make sense there, but you'll see.
Okay, you just sound crazy at the moment, but I'll
Yeah,
hear
you'll
you
see.
out.
In any case, it's fucking stupid. It's the master classes drive me fucking insane because half of them you need riding for. And characters like Linhardt, who this whole time has been Bishop, Light Magic, Reason, I'm not thinking about riding. I have no fucking clue about riding. Also, he needs to have Lance. He needs Lance level C. I don't want to have him use a Lance. He's a fucking healer and uses magic. And unless you look ahead, unless you plan for this stuff, which thankfully I did, like it maybe I was about 15 hours in the game before I started planning for it. But once you do, then you're okay. It's just, it doesn't make sense for someone who is new to this series and who is going down a certain path. And sometimes the characters will come to you in class and they'll be like, I think I should focus on this. And I think a lot of people will be like, well, I don't know. You probably know better than me.
That's normally good for the immediate next class, but it's
Yes.
not good for like down the
long
line.
term.
Yeah.
Right. And I was planning for the long term, and that's the advice I gave to you was like, hey, decide now. Make sure you know what you're going for, because
Oh, my magic users, they're always doing that riding practice now.
yes,
That's what
exactly.
They do it.
Exactly. Because it will pay off, because eventually at the end game, you will have access to the Holy Knight class, or you'll have access to the Bow Knight class. Like those ones that, for me, and a lot of people have said this online, for me, if you're having master classes, you should expect people to go for those. You should expect people to want your characters to be at the utmost they can possibly be, which is the highest rung. And the master classes are just, they feel way more specialist than where you want them to be, right? Because for a sword-based character, there is really no master class that fits them. A purely sword-based character has no class they can go down, because the only class is the Mortal Savant. And the Mortal Savant is a character that requires not only sword, but reason. And there is no character in my army, save Dorothea, who, to be frank, her physical strength isn't that high, who can really take advantage of that class in its proper way, because you need a character like Robin from Awakening who's really good at magic and at swords. And there just isn't that character, at least in my class of students, that could apply to that kind of specific.
Physical and magic at the same time.
Yeah, aside from Byleth, who Byleth can do that, and actually later on in the game, Byleth becomes far more magically focused, and it's a thing that I invested in, as I realised that was happening.
But Byleth levels up in a very different way to every other student. So
Byleth is a god. Like Byleth just gets stupid, like gets 7+1 stats every level. It's crazy.
Wow.
So it's a separate thing, but. For me, the master classes drove me insane, because I'm like, none of these work, and I have to move them around. Like, by the end of the game, yes, I was there and I had it, but like, Petra, for example, I took Petra down fucking 17 different routes. First she was going to be a Wyvern, then she was going to be a Pegasus, then she was going to be an Assassin or a Swordmaster. She has the most classes unlocked through my entire army, just because I couldn't fucking decide what to do with her. And at this point, like, I had done all the skills, I'd leveled her up to be a Wyvern Lord, and I'm on the last map, and all I've been doing is keeping her as a fucking assassin, just because there are chests everywhere, and she's helpful to get chests. So, like, it was like, no, not worth it in any way. But I can make her a Wyvern Lord if I want to, and she's really good at swords and axes and at bows. Like, she's good at everything, basically.
Did you recruit much from other houses, or are you given like extra characters who are non-students anyway, or is this very spoilery territory and we can end this conversation now?
Well, yeah, so there is the opportunity to recruit characters from other houses, and my advice to you would be, if you are going to do that, if you plan to play this game once, look up the paralogs, because the paralogs are specific chapters that are bonus missions that you will only get if you have a character from that other house in your party. That's mainly for the second half of the game. For the first half of the game, I think you can have one of the characters that's involved in the paralog in your party and it will play out. Whereas in the second half of the game, if you don't have both characters, you won't see the paralog. So Mercedes, for example, is the only character I recruited. And in the second half of the game, there is a paralog with her and Casper. And it's actually one of the most important story paralogs in the game. It reveals the identity of a key character, which I don't know that I would have gotten if I hadn't had this paralog. And that was only because I randomly decided I wanted to recruit Mercedes, because I wanted an extra healer. She seemed like she fitted really well into the Gremory class, which is a class which is focused around both faith and reason. And so that's why I recruited her, and I liked her. I thought she was an interesting character. So I got that power log because of that. But if you don't recruit Mercedes and you just have Casper, you're not going to see that power log. So you miss out on that entire thing. I am obviously playing through this game multiple times. I'm going to do a Golden Deers run. I'm going to do a Blue Lions run. So for me, I don't really care about recruiting characters. That's why I only recruited one. Because the thing I really liked about this game was doubling down on your own students, was doubling down on that very small, intimate class, and having everyone support with everyone.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying that aspect, and I've not felt much of an urge to recruit others.
Totally.
In that sense.
I would only say recruit others if you're interested in the power logs, and the power logs are probably some of the best maps and objectives in the game, as well as they elucidate a lot of story stuff that I wouldn't have known otherwise. But also the advice I will give you in terms of recruiting people is when you go around and talk to them, they're all like, okay, you need to have magic and bow. And I'm like, well, I'm fucking miles away. How am I going to get this person? Or you need to have authority and lance. And I'm like, my Byleth hasn't used a fucking lance at all. He's level E in lance. That doesn't matter. If you get support level B with these characters, they will more than likely just join you. So don't worry about upping your stats, because that's one way of doing it, but it's also a way harder way of doing it, because that means your Byleth, if you want to get everyone, has to be a master in pretty much every fucking stat, and you physically can't do that. So just do support levels, give them gifts, have tea times with them, etc. If you want to get them to your side, just give them the lost items, give them their gifts. All that stuff will then mean that they will eventually join you if you get them to level B support. And it is possible. I saw someone on Twitter being like, I recruited every character. You can do it. It's very doable. It will just take a long time. It will take a lot of work, extra work, and it will mean that, your playthrough will be that much longer for doing so. So yeah, my advice to everyone out there would be focus on support level and take a look at the power logs. If you're only going to play through this game once, which I assume is most people, then go after the power logs that you want to do.
And building support with other houses you can do through gifts and cooking.
Yes.
And is that what you'd recommend?
Yeah, through having meals with them. For me, I tended to just have meals with my class because motivation is such an important factor.
Exactly, yeah.
But tea time, doing cooking meals with them, just giving them the lost items. The lost items is a big thing because it will give them +2 to their motivation.
And that's you just look up a list online.
Yeah, you just look up a list.
Around,
Exactly, because otherwise you're clicking through fucking endless. I mean, you can try and figure them out, but it's just
I figured one out.
not.
It was fun, but
you can do that. But I now have a list that's ridiculously long, and most of them I can't give anymore because I don't have any of those characters, so it's just kind of pointless. So in terms of other characters, I would say it just depends on what your plan is with this game. For me, when I go into my next playthrough, I'm going to look up the power logs and I'm going to recruit specific characters that I want to do those power logs, but also I'm going to mainly focus on the characters that I have, and build those supports, because I think that is, when I talk about the difference in Fire Emblem between, say, a game that I really enjoy and a game that is less so. Radiant Dawn I just played through, and I think one of my fundamental problems with Radiant Dawn is that it just jumps you around constantly. It doesn't let you commit to an army, it doesn't let you commit to a group of characters, you have no attachment to anybody, you're just ping-ponging around with all these different places and different people. And I felt zero attachment to anybody in that game. Because I hadn't invested in leveling them or whatever, they all come at different classes and levels, and it's just a mess. Whereas in this game, it is such a tight-knit group. You are with those students the whole way through, and you get to know them so well, and you pick a path, you feel so much more invested because you have trained them to get to that place. And I think that is why this game is connected so much with me, is because it really doubles down on a small group. And even later in the game, the maximum units you can take into a fight is maybe 10 or 11.
Wow.
And that is unheard of for a Fire Emblem game.
It's normally as high as 20?
It can be, yeah. It can be like 15 to 19 to whatever. You can have a lot of characters. But this game recognizes, I think, that you're going to be spending a lot of time with these characters. These are the ones that matter. And yes, you do get other faculty members. You can recruit Manuela and Hanneman if you want. You can get Catherine on your side, or Shamir, or these other, teachers and faculty members. And there are a few that I have used in my army just because I don't have enough characters otherwise. But for the most part, I stuck with my core group and I've really enjoyed playing with those guys. So yeah.
It's cool. I think what's interesting is that Intelligent Systems could have done a very by the numbers, good looking Fire Emblem game, more or less gone with a similar system to the Fates games, and
yes,
they decided no, we're not playing it safe, we're twisting, and they went big and bold, and I can accept that that's maybe not going to appeal to everyone, but like, I'm glad they took that gamble, and like I am enjoying it so far. It's a slow burn for me personally, but I'm prepared that I will enjoy this much more when I'm 30-40 hours in, and like I'm just glad that they took a gamble on what was not becoming a stale formula, but like they had a safe formula in Fates and Awakening and the Echoes remake. I know that was slightly different, but like
it's a very different game. Yeah,
but like those were very good selling games, and then they could have just stuck by that formula, and they've not. They've really kind of reinvented the formula substantially, and that's cool to see. Like that they don't just play it safe.
Yeah, and you look at like Pokemon, for example. You compare what Game Freak is doing with the new Pokemon to what Intelligent Systems done with Fire Emblem, and it's like worlds apart in terms of ambition, in terms of scope, in terms of innovation. Yeah, it's interesting that this is a series that had found a very popular niche, and it could have kept going down that path, right, with children and with waifus and anime and all that stuff, and it has its fair share of...
It does to a degree, yeah, but...
It does, like, I was showing you some videos of, like, Dorothy was flirting with me in the first support conversation, and Manuela is just, like, all fucking over you. It's just ridiculous. But what I'll say is that, by having there not be marriage and children and all of that extra superfluous nonsense, which I did like, I thought was really good in Awakening, but in Fates it felt very tacked on.
Definitely.
By not focusing on that, you can get relationships that are not necessarily leading romantically, but are much more friendship based, and even between male and female characters and stuff like that. And what it means is that your class feels very tight knit. It just all of that just works in symphony with this core idea of you are the professor, this is your class, and even after the 5-year time jump and all that stuff, there's still that core identity of the group that you have. I will say one of my favorite things about the 5-year time jump that I didn't expect is that everyone looks fucking different. They get new outfits, new haircuts. It's great. Like, they show up and I'm like, oh, whoa, Petra, you look so different. You got some fucking cool shit you're wearing right now. It's great. And actually, I haven't been spoiled too much on any of the other armies. I haven't really seen that many of the other characters post-time skip, which is interesting. I wonder how that plays out in the different routes and all that stuff, and all the routes have their own things, etc. So, yeah, I don't know. Any other things you want to say about Fire Emblem? Of course, you've got a long way to go, but...
Yeah, I need to play more, and then I'll come back with some more thoughts. But
cool.
It's a slow burn for me so far, but I am enjoying it. 10 hours in, and yeah, going very slow, bally pace.
Yeah, I would say advice for people out there is to just, not feel overly like you have to optimize all the time, because you will get more time than you need, especially in the later parts of the game. It's not just the school year that will give you the time to do that. You will get time later on to buff your stats and to have more support conversations. Like, I think I had maxed out every support conversation by chapter 14 or so, or maybe 15 or so. And one of the interesting things actually is some of the support conversations you cannot access until after the time jump happens. So there will be some that you'll be locked out of. There's one with the character Cyril that I never got his C rank when I was in the school portion of the game, so now I just can't access it. So I would say try and get everyone to at least a C rank before you go through this time skip, because after the time skip happens, new conversations open up that then reference things that happened in the previous support conversations that were pre-time skip, which I think is really cool. I do like also that some of the conversations have 4 conversations, because they'll have like 2 arrows over the top of them, so you have like 2 B rank conversations and then an A rank or whatever. Yeah. Okay, that's a lot of Fire Emblem. I freaking love it. I think it's fantastic, and I just kind of want to finish it now and play more and just never stop playing.
And you're going to go straight into your Golden Deer run after that?
Yes, I that's kind of the plan at the moment. Do a New Game Plus, just go Golden Deer, and I'll be streaming that playthrough, so that will be a lot of fun. So yeah.
Nice.